Hello, everyone. I'm Andy.
And I'm Scott.
Welcome to the T and Timbits podcast, global perspectives on business development to help you prosper. Today, we are going to be talking about traditional sales methods and those that we believe may still be working and workable in the modern world. But before we get into that, Scott, do you have a story for us from the last week?
I have an interesting story, and I think it's probably one that we've all seen before, and probably have different approaches to. So I'll be interested.
Okay.
I'll be interested to get your take. So I was talking to a prospect, and they needed a new website, and I had a good conversation with the key marketing person there, and then he needed to say, "Okay, this feels good. Let me bring in one of my partners who sort of manages this aspect of the business, as professional services firm." And so the partner comes in on the next call and says to me, well, this all feels really good. And I had already gone through sort of a spiel about our approach and process and delivered services and whatnot. And he says, this all sounds well and good, but we're going to have a tough time selling this to my other business partner who doesn't really understand the value of digital and why we need a new website and what's wrong with the other one. So we're going to need you to come in and do your thing and sell him on why we need a new website. And I think once upon a time I would have been like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, I can do that. And this time I said, well, I actually don't think we're ready to chat much further, because at this point, we can sell you a really good process for delivering on these things, but if the business hasn't identified that they're aligned on this need, we can't come in and help you much further. And there was silence on the other side of the line, but then it came back a moment later to say, no, you're right, I get it. I retract the question. So I think it's just, I wanted to share that reflection to see what you thought and see if you think that that's the right way to do it.
I think it's a very smart approach. If you get the feeling that the company you're providing a service for, or trying to provide a service for, isn't ready to buy that service or in the position to fully understand or appreciate and value that service, then you're not going to be able to provide the most value to them. They need to understand themselves what it is that they need, how they need it, and how they will implement it and get the most value out of it. Of course, part of our role is to help them on that journey, and doing exactly that when you pick up that they're not ready, and then help them on that journey is exactly the right thing to do. So,
well, there you go for validating that. I didn't exactly shut the door. I said, listen, these conversations never go from sort of the initial call to signing a contract 4 calls later. This is something that may take months to come to fruition, and I am here as a resource and a guide as you go through those internal conversations. And there are a few things that I can do to support some other conversations, and I can even put forward some of my time to come in and do some brainstorming and some workshopping with you, but we're not close to being able to talk about the scope of an engagement yet, because we need to make sure that we can develop that alignment. So the conversations are ongoing, but we've definitely sort of kept it at the top of the pipeline.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. But if we move into today's topic, Scott, what do you feel is the desired outcome from our discussion?
So we're gonna talk about traditional sales methods that still work and should not be neglected. And so I think a lot of times people get caught up by technology and trends and the latest buzz and forget to kind of go back to basics and just think that because something's old, quote unquote, it's no longer relevant. So I just want everybody listening to put themselves in the headspace and reflect on whether or not something that they're doing is probably could be emphasized by those core principles again, and maybe not getting distracted by the shiny new object.
No, that's right. I think as well, there is a challenge, because most people have recognized now that some of the traditional methods that are very much about taking control and influencing
Yeah.
someone and forcing someone into something. And
Well,
once they
it's like
don't get sold,
persuasion, right? Yeah.
that's right. That's right. And we do still see that in the in the modern world. You go and buy a new car or rent a house or buy a house. You typically experience that old-fashioned sales approach, unfortunately, and that is prevalent in those industries. But I think in a business to business setup, when we're talking about traditional methods that still work, one that I'm a big fan of and try and push out there, and there's been a lot of people who have been very much resistant to it and trying to get away from it, or trying to find an excuse to get away from it, perhaps, is picking up the telephone, making phone calls.
That was mine. You stole it.
Sorry.
Absolutely. I think like I would go ahead and call them cold calls.
Yeah.
I think the modern adjustment of that is that we do it with a little bit more tact and
Yeah.
preparedness.
Correct. Yeah.
And I
It's not just
definitely
working
think,
your way through a phone book anymore,
yeah,
as it used to
yeah.
be. Yeah.
Um, I definitely think that gets neglected, or it gets uh, sort of disregarded as ineffective or schmarmy, like. But the what you're trying to do is just establish whether or not there's a fit for, and maybe now is not the right time. Maybe I called off cycle or something like that. But if you can ask the right questions, in my case, when was the last time you know spruced up your website? When was the last time you did a health check of your whole entire digital experience? Well, that gives you a little bit of information to put them in your CRM and call them back in 12 months if it's not now.
I think as well, the telephone has become a scary medium for a lot of people.
Mhm.
Talking to strangers can be quite scary, and there are a lot of people out there who try and convince you that it's fine. You just generate incoming traffic and they will automatically convert. Put them in a lead funnel. Send them repeated email processes.
Right, right.
In an automated system, and absolutely everybody's going to sign up. That does work to a certain extent with some things and for some people, but definitely, if you can get those leads coming in, then I think the next step is to pick up the telephone and actually talk to someone, and your conversion rate will go through the
Mhm.
roof. So that it really changes things, making
So
that
it's
step.
definitely a traditional sales tactic that is still effective
Yeah,
and should not be neglected. It needs to be part of the selling that you do.
mm,
I think it gets even more effective and impactful by doing it in conjunction with some of the more modern sales,
absolutely,
producing
absolutely.
content. Like, listen, I know I'm calling out of the blue and you don't know who I am, but I happen to have done a little bit of research and I know a little bit about your business. And I think that some of what we talk about over here, and I just want to make sure that in all the noise, that we have this resource. Let me know if I can chat further, kind of thing, is, you know, um, sort of bringing that modern approach to one of those traditional tactics.
Absolutely. Any other things other than the telephone? Traditional methods, traditional tools that you feel could be or
Well,
are still very valuable.
yeah, you just brought up email marketing, and I think in the example that you shared, it was the example of doing this wrong. You just scrape a list of addresses and you put them into your database and you blast, sort of spray and pray approach. But if you have a well curated list of email addresses for people in your industry that are legitimate prospects that you've met at a trade show, back to whether or not it benefits you to do trade shows, you email marketing and email communication should also not be neglected. There's a lot of we get a lot of calls, and there's a lot of distracting information that you need to be doing more video or showing up on LinkedIn the right way. And all of those things are important as well. But we always tell people that, you cannot spread yourself too thin.
No.
And if you're going to start somewhere, you've got to first make sure that you've got some sort of cadence with your email outreach, that's meaningful, that's valuable to your audience, and that your audience is actually a valid list of people that would be interested in what you have to say.
Yeah, no, that's right. I think as well, once we get into the meeting with people face to face as well, and we are there in the meeting, I think something that has been neglected or abused or taken in the wrong way is remembering to actually ask for the business. It's a traditional method, but it's surprising
Yeah.
how many meetings I go into where the end of the conversation, where the natural thing is, so, should we proceed together, or what, or leading that conversation of, these are the next steps, this is what will happen, which of these do you want to go down, however you do it, but actually asking for the business, leading those next steps,
Yes.
is often neglected. It's a very traditional way of doing business, and I think people have got scared from it because of the bad practices by many people, that they feel, oh, no, I want to be a bit softer. But of course, customers are expecting you to lead them on the journey and take
Yeah.
you through that process. And if you neglect that, then it's very unlikely that you're going to get them go, actually, we would really like to do business with you. Please tell us what the next steps are.
Yes. I really like that. I think you're absolutely right. And I think that there's a whole sort of cloud that hangs over the idea of asking for the business.
Yes.
So again, I think that's an example of like a traditional sales move that kind of got a bad rap, and probably because it was being done completely inappropriately.
Yeah.
But I also, I don't know if I would call it asking for the business, but I do think it's advancing the process and getting clarity on whether or not it is time to, get to an agreement or schedule a 6-month check-in because you're not ready.
It's making clarity on that next step.
Yeah. So maybe there's again a sort of a more sophisticated, more modern way of doing that. But looking at our own pipeline recently, I've come to the same conclusion that we are actually not being very good at saying, okay, listen, we've actually been having several good conversations over the past several months. I'm going to add that, like, what I think is different about this now is, especially in the B2B space, is we've now been talking to each other for enough time, and I think I have enough of an understanding to give you a recommendation, and here's my expert opinion on how you should move forward, and let me know if you want to take my advice and go forward with this recommendation, or reconsider other options, and we should maybe chat later. And I don't know, would you consider that asking for the business, just putting that in front of them?
I think
would you accept this?
If we're going to package it in a way like that, then I think the terminology asking for the business, simply because I brought it up, is is fine to put it under that umbrella. But yes, I think advancing that process, advancing that sales discussion, advancing it to the point where we are going to either conclude the conversation as we're not going any further at the time being, or we are going to the next steps, is part of that process of asking for the business.
Love it. Well, I think those are 3 very good recommendations and considerations. Using the telephone, don't neglect email, and don't forget to ask for the business. Close that sales cycle. Don't let it sort of drift off into obscurity. Thanks for sharing your thoughts, Andy.
No, it's been a pleasure. So how can people get in touch with us, Scott?
All they need to do is go to tandtimbits.com, and you can find Andy and I there. You can find all of our episodes. You can connect with us on all the streaming platforms, and we would welcome your feedback. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you very much, Scott.
All right. Thanks, Andy.